Hello and welcome to the video. This is my review and overview of this new thing from SEQURE. Now SEQURE isn't known for making quadcopters, but they have brought this first one out and they have decided to, if you're going to do it big. This is a 10-inch. Available in a couple of different SKUs, but interestingly only with analog and without action camera mounts, and they're also specifying the weight carrying capacity. Now, back when we first started all the quad stuff back in the early 2010s, all the innovation and the new stuff that was coming out was driven by enthusiasts, people like me, lots of others, building and designing and playing with this stuff. Initially using gyros on the arms of tricopters. Those of you that are old enough will remember all that. Then going through the very first flight controllers, into KK 2.0 boards. Then my first ever series was actually on the multi-Wii flight controller back in, I think that was 2013, 2014. And then the next big influx of cash and innovation into the hobby all came from the kind of 5-inch drone racing bubble. That bubble lasted for 4 or 5 years. Lots of people came into the hobby, creating new technology, new motors, custom props, different frames, new flight controllers. And a lot of the vendors that are kicking around these days really cemented their position in the hobby during that period. However, that bubble eventually burst. However, now I think a lot of the innovation and the money that's coming into UAV and drone quadcopter manufacture is actually coming in not because of the hobby and things like racing, but because of things like global conflicts where these things are being used as weapons. And unfortunately, that does mean that some of the stuff that I'm going to get in are going to be byproducts of that. We will get benefit of the hobby by getting access to some technologies that will probably be developed primarily for those uses. And this feels a little bit like it's one of those. It's unusual for somebody that hasn't made multi-rotors before to start making them in 10 inches. And it's also unusual for them to be so overt about the weight carrying capacity. So let me go through this because this is the one that's available to us as hobbyists. Let's have a look at it, see what it is, and also see what it isn't. So let's go through some of the specs. This is really designed to be kind of an endurance flyer with flight times up to about 45 minutes and flight speeds up to about 150 kilometers an hour, and also designed for kind of longer distances too. This one's come with Express LRS with the usual slightly odd position of the antenna stuck at the back, potentially occluded by carbon fiber when you're flying back to yourself. But I can see lots of pilots would probably add some kind of diversity antenna here at the back. So this frame is a positive X, wheelbase is 460mm, Betaflight flight controller in the middle. I'll plug that in and show you what that looks like in a moment. ESC is a 32-bit 70-amp 4-in-1 ESC. The motors are 3 115 900 kV units out here on the arms. Analog system in this, no options for HD at all. So there's an analog camera up here at the front. Propellers are 1050 3-bladed props. VTX at the back, depending on which version you go for, is either a 5.8 gig 2.5 watt unit or a 5.8 gig 1.6 watt unit. Standard RHCP SMA antenna at the back. Receiver is an Express LRS 2.4 gig. They also do versions, I believe, with the 915 as well. Power plug is integrated on the back. They've rated the load as 3 kilograms and the maximum load is 4 kilograms. Now, when they say load, I'm not entirely sure what they mean by that. Is that the overall weight? I'm expecting that they're going to say that it can carry a 3 kilogram weight up to 4 kilograms. We'll see what the hover point is in a minute. Maximum flight speed is 150 kilometers an hour. Flight time is claimed to be 45 minutes. Recommended battery is a big battery for this. It needs to be 6S and anything from 5 to 10,000 milliamp hours. I'm actually using these new GNB flight power lipos, the 7500 6S version. These are the 70C or 140C burst. These should do a good job on this and give me, hopefully, about half an hour's flight time. GPS at the back is an M1025Q GPS. It's mounted on a mount with an adjustable rake, so that's not going to work. If you wanted to change this to iNav, you'd have to kind of fix that. There's an optional buzzer, which isn't on this one. Size is pretty chunky, 368 by 363 by 45 millimeters, and the weight is claimed to be about 978 grams. Arm thickness on this is 7mm, top and bottom frame are 2.5mm, and the bottom arm brace is 3mm. Blades are attached in reverse rotation, be aware of that. Again, they're Gemfan 1050 3-bladed props. Weighing mine here, the flying weight without the battery is 981 grams, so only a couple of grams over the one that's stated on the website. And as I said, I'm using one of those new GMB 7500 mAh 6S70C batteries. That's quite a heavy battery, so that takes the total weight of this without any action cameras or anything else on, just the battery and the frame in flying trim at 1.76 kilograms. So let's have a little bit of a closer look at Betaflight. Nothing in the data flash, so it doesn't look like it's been armed at the factory. You can see here that it's actually a H7 based processor, so that's quite a powerful CPU in here. Let's make sure expert mode is on. There isn't really that much. The GPS is set up on UART 6. The ESC telemetry is set up on UART 8. UART 1 is being used for the Express LRS receiver that's in here. Configuration looks pretty standard. Very high 8K gyro and PID loop frequency. Because it's a H7 based processor, it's only just ticking away at 23%. Definitely interesting that they've gone with such a heavyweight processor for this. Power and battery look like this. Again, I'm going to pop links down below if you want to go and have a look at the dump and diff. Failsafe is set to GPS rescue, which it should be. Interesting to see whether or not they've actually set the hover throttle properly. PID tuning looks like this. Again, dump and diff below if you want to go into the details. No expo added on the rates. Receiver is set for CRSF and telemetry is turned on, so we are going to get GPS coordinates back to the radio. Modes are actually set up quite nicely. A little bit weird in terms of the Express LRS configuration, because obviously you want the first auxiliary channel to be arming. So I've come in here and changed a few things around. GPS is set up for auto config, although I'd potentially turn on Galileo and a ground assistance type. And the on-screen display, these are very personal things, aren't they? I would come in here and have a bit of a mooch around. I definitely have. So with all that said, let's talk about the flying. This does have quite a bit of power on the 6S setup that it's got here. It is hovering in that weight of about 1.76 kilograms at only about a quarter throttle. So there is quite a bit of weight on here, which I guess is what the weight carrying stuff is all about. Noise level is good. There's that low thrumming noise from those bigger props. They are spinning an awful lot slower than they would be on something like a 5-inch. My advice though would be to balance those props. I'm getting a little bit of jello sometimes in the image when I'm flying here, and that is probably due to the fact that the props aren't well balanced. So I would balance the props and maybe do some dynamic balancing with the props on the motors on each of the individual arms just to get it absolutely spot on. But it definitely feels like there isn't quite enough bracing here, which is quite common with these larger quad-tile frames, to get rid of all of the jello and vibration going into the flight controller. It feels good when it's flying around. However, you can hear occasionally a little bit of pulsing from the motors, but that might be those slightly unbalanced props occasionally getting a little bit out of sync and resonating a little bit. In terms of the flight time, well, it's about 8 amps-ish in fast-forward flight, so 1000 milliamp hours is being used in roughly 11-12 minutes. However, I'm not completely sure I agree with that. I think this is probably going to give me probably about half an hour's flight time. I'm not completely confident that the setup in the flight controller is absolutely spot on. Now, the flying that I've done here has gone very well. It's a very smooth, powerful, quite large quad and an awful lot of fun to fly. However, the last couple of flights that I did, I noticed that there was a strange noise coming from the motors, and when I landed, the motors were coming down incredibly hot as well. One thing I would recommend is if you get this thing, double check that all of the bolts on the motors are nice and tight and that they are thread locked. I have fed that back to SEQURE that should be thread locked from the factory. Mine were coming loose with vibration, and that was causing some of the weirdness and the motors to come down hot. So if that happens to you, that's what to check. There are a number of things that I like here. It is a simple, sturdy construction, and there's loads of room for your big battery on top. and unfortunately that doesn't leave an awful lot of room for some of the other niceties that you'd probably expect if you were flying it as a hobby-based pilot. Those are specifically the antenna position and alignment at the back, although seeming to work fine, I think is suboptimal. Watch for the cable length from the VTX for the camera for some HD systems. It's physically quite a distance between where the DJI or Avatar or HD0 system will be in the back and the camera at the front. No soft mount for the camera, so that vibration is getting through. I would have expected there to be some kind of soft mounting option in there. Hopefully they add that into the box. No action camera mount in here either. That's something that I would probably tweak if I was going to be flying this regularly. In fact, let's talk about that at the end. As I already said, I'd balance the props. 10-inch, it's easy to get camera jello, and I'm definitely getting someone here. So if I went to HD, I'd definitely have to spend a bit of time playing with all that stuff. And I'd also check for spares availability. You're going to need some spare props for this in case you do catch something. And it's also good to know that you can get hold of spare motors and other stuff as well. If I were going to be flying this regularly, there are a number of changes that I would make. I would flash it with iNav. I would put a hard mount for the GPS on the back at a very specific angle so that I could have a compass in there as well for the return to home and flying functions. I'd provide some kind of soft mount for the camera at the front, and I'd also design a 3D mount, something at the front that could handle an action camera like one of the new Thumb 2s that I looked at recently. Although the basics are all covered, there are a couple of things missing that would make it perfect for the hobby. So if you like a 10-inch quads, you're looking for something that has that weight carrying capacity, and you're happy with analog, then, maybe this is up your street. Maybe this is one of those models that has been designed for another purpose that's been made available to the hobby, and those extra things that we would expect as hobbyists just aren't being added back in. Thank you for watching my video. Check out the playlist, and adding Painless 360 to your search terms will help you find my content. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. You can support the time I spend here answering questions and helping others by using the links in the video description.